On our 30th wedding anniversary, my husband's past showed up and sat down at the table like it owned the place, not as a memory or a regret, but as a grown man with his mother. And right in the middle of the party, in front of everyone we knew, she lifted a glass and did something that made the whole room forget how to breathe. I'm Irene. I'm 52, and up until a few months ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was married to. Turns out, the man I'd shared a bed with for 3 decades had a whole other life he'd never mentioned, and a son he'd left behind before that boy ever took his first breath. This is Anonymous Confessions, where we share the stories that keep people up at night. If you believe in secrets, forgiveness, or just really good drama, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this one. We live in a regular mid-sized city somewhere in the middle of the country. White siding, a beloved pickup truck, the kind of neighborhood where people wave at each other but don't actually know what's happening inside each other's houses. Andrew owns a construction company. He's the type who thinks if he paid the bill on time, he's basically a saint. We have 2 daughters, Kate and Erin, both smart, both married, both desperate for kids. And I mean desperate in the way that makes you watch other women's strollers at the mall like they're displaying things you'll never be allowed to own. Year after year, nothing. Doctors, tests, calendars marked with ovulation cycles, hormones that made them cry at commercials. Her husbands were supportive, but you could see the weight of it in their shoulders too. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a dark little thought kept creeping in. What did we do wrong? What are we being punished for? For our 30th anniversary, we decided to go all out. Nice restaurant, jazz band, all the relatives crammed into one room like we actually all got along. And me, playing the role of the perfect wife, decided to make Andrew a present, a family film. You know the type. Old photos set to sappy music, his parents' wedding, his grandparents on the farm, our wedding, the girls as babies, all that sentimental stuff he pretends to hate but secretly loves. The problem was the photos. Some of them were still in his grandparents' old farmhouse, a few hours outside the city. The place had been empty for years, but we still had the keys. "I'll go myself," I told him. "You're busy." He just nodded, barely looking up from his phone. "There are boxes in the attic," he said. "They're labeled. And hey, if you see that old picture in the bedroom, grab it." He said it so casually, like he was asking me to pick up milk. That picture, the faded image of the Virgin Mary with a child. Nothing special, just a cheap copy of an old Catholic print. But 28 years ago, I'd been on my knees in front of that image, sobbing like my heart would crack open, begging God to give me a baby. A couple months later, I was pregnant with Kate. So yeah, I believe in signs. Sue me. The farmhouse sat on the edge of a town so small it had 1 grocery store, 1 church, and I swear 1 working traffic light. The key turned with a squeak that echoed through the whole empty house. Inside, it smelled like dust, old books, and something else. Loneliness, maybe. Or guilt. I set my suitcase down and walked into the kitchen. And I froze. There was a man sitting at the table. Plaid shirt, slumped shoulders, gray hair. He was just sitting there, staring at nothing. I blinked, and the chair was empty. No, I don't drink. No, I don't see things. But sometimes a guilty conscience projects itself onto empty chairs. Later, the neighbor across the road, a tiny old woman named Agnes with a yard full of garden gnomes, said to me, "Some folks say old Mr. Miller never really left. If he showed himself to you, he must have liked you." Thanks, Agnes. That's not terrifying at all. I went upstairs to the bedroom. The picture was still there, above the old wooden bed, that same sad expression. I took it down and propped it against the doorframe. Then I climbed to the attic to find the photos. The boxes were labeled just like Andrew said, weddings, kids, vacations, and one box that said, "Old letters, do not throw out."
Come on, how do you not open that? Inside were envelopes with yellowed stamps, bills, postcards, Christmas cards, all addressed to Andrew's parents at the farm, and buried in the middle a thick envelope with neat handwriting. Dear Mrs. Miller, personal. Return address, Rachel Dawson, some tiny town I'd never heard of. The envelope had been opened, but the letter was folded neatly inside, like someone had read it and then decided to hide it instead of throw it out. I sat right there on the dusty floor and started to read. The letter began polite. Dear Mrs. Miller, you don't know me. My name is Rachel. I dated your son, Andrew, in college. Then came everything I'd only half heard once, years ago, whispered by his sister Mary during a fight I wasn't supposed to overhear. He dated a girl, promised to marry her, she got pregnant, he said it wasn't his. Then he said it was too soon. Then he said he couldn't afford a kid. Then he just disappeared. Her parents were poor, her church was against abortion. She kept the baby, a boy, Ryan. When he was 2, they found a serious heart defect, the kind doctors whisper about. The surgeries were expensive. Rachel wrote that she tried to reach Andrew, but her letters came back, so she wrote to his parents, politely at first, then desperately, then angry and terrified. I'm not asking you to take him in, she wrote. I'm just asking for help with treatment. This is your grandson. This is a child's life. No answer. Years passed. The boy grew, but the disease didn't go anywhere. And then there was the last letter, the one with no polite phrases left. Fine, she wrote, so be it. Let your son live as if this child doesn't exist, but may he never know the joy of having a son of his own. And if he has daughters, may they know what it is to want a child and not have one. Let every smile he has years from now be poisoned by what he did. I was sitting on that attic floor, and my fingers went ice cold. Andrew and I, 0 sons, 2 daughters, both struggling to have kids. I don't believe in curses like in movies, but sometimes coincidences get too precise to ignore. I don't know about you, but if you're still watching, this is the part where things get real. And if you haven't subscribed to Anonymous Confessions yet, now is the time. We tell stories like this every week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. I brought the picture home. I hung it in the guest room until I could figure out where to put it. I shoved the letters in a closet, but I couldn't stop thinking about them. A few days later, Andrew was sitting in the kitchen watching the news. I asked, casual as I could, Andrew, did you have any serious relationships before me? He shrugged. There were girls, nothing serious. What does nothing serious mean? He grimaced. Well, there was one who tried to pin a baby on me, but it was sketchy. I wasn't sure it was mine. Dad said if I gave in to blackmail, I'd be paying forever, so I just bailed. He said it like he was talking about canceling a gym membership. I looked at him and thought about the photo in that envelope, a little boy with huge eyes and a scar across his chest. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I called Max Bennett, private investigator, former cop, married to a woman I know from church. Calm, methodical, always holding a coffee cup. I invited him to my kitchen and put the box in front of me. Max, I said, I need you to find these people and tell me the truth. He flipped through the letters. This for court? He asked. No, this is for me, so I know who I'm married to. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, finding them isn't hard, but I'm warning you, you might not like what you find. Spoiler, he was right. Max called a week later. Found them, he said. Tiny town a couple states over, trailer on the edge of town. The boy's almost 30 now, works for a local beekeeper for cash, helps out at the store, walks like every move costs him interest. Is he healthy? I asked, even though I already knew. No, but he's alive. I talked to them, told them I was helping an old acquaintance. He paused. Irene, I pulled his medical records, ran them by a cardiologist. Back then, they told her he wouldn't make it to 20 without expensive surgery. Somehow, he did. But right now, his heart is running on fumes. Then he told me about the DNA. I'd borrowed Andrew's hairbrush. Max took a soda can Ryan drank from. Probability of paternity over 99%. Sometimes numbers hurt more than words. I'm not the kind of woman who sits on something like that. That night, I set the table, put the box of letters in the middle, laid the photo of little Ryan on top, and the lab printout over it. When Andrew sat down, I slid it all toward him. "What's this?" he frowned. "This is your son," I said, "and the woman who begged your parents to help keep him alive, and the proof he's yours." At first, he tried to laugh it off. "Irene, you believe every woman with a sob story?" "I believe DNA, and I believe my own eyes." He flipped through the letters, went pale, pressed his lips together. "That was a long time ago," he finally said. "I was a kid. I wasn't sure he was mine. Dad said
It was a setup. They could have told me. They did tell you, I said. The letters came to them. They just decided their son mattered more than some kid's life. And you decided the same." He slammed his fist on the table. "What, you trying to put me on trial after 30 years? "No," I said quietly. "The trial's been going on this whole time. You just didn't show up." We yelled. Then we were quiet. Then we yelled again. That night, he slept in the guest room, the one with the picture. I lay in our bed and listened to him pacing, and for the first time in years, I heard my husband pray. "God," he whispered, "I screwed this up. I'm not asking for a miracle. Just give me a chance to do one thing right." In the morning, he came into the kitchen, face gray. "I'm going to see them," he said. "Myself." "We're going," I corrected him. "This is my family too now." The drive was 3 hours of silence. He clutched the steering wheel like it might drop into hell if he let go. Their town was even poorer than his grandparents'. Run-down trailers, peeling paint, a grocery store that looked like it wanted to retire. Rachel opened the door and looked at us like someone who'd been waiting for good news her whole life and had finally stopped believing it would ever come. "Hi," Andrew said. "I know who you are," she cut in. Her voice was steady, like a wire stretched too tight. "You come to hear how I cursed you? You're a little late." "I came to apologize," he said, "and to ask if I can help." Ryan appeared behind her. Tall, skinny, gray eyes, the exact same jawline as Andrew. He leaned on the doorframe like he needed it to stay upright. "Mom, that him?" he asked calmly. "That's him," she said. Andrew started talking, not making excuses, just talking. How he'd been young and scared, how his father pressured him, how he chose his career over his child, how every year that went by he told himself it was definitely too late now. Rachel listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Do you have any idea how many nights I sat by his bed wondering if he'd still be breathing in the morning?" "I don't," Andrew said, "and that's on me." He offered to pay for everything, full workup at a good hospital, any surgery they could do, all ongoing treatment, no paperwork, no "if you prove he's mine," just like that. Ryan looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "I'm not calling you Dad. I'm not asking you for anything." Andrew nodded. "I'm the one who has to ask." A week later, they came to our city. Ryan moved into our guest room, the one with the picture. At the hospital, doctors pored over his old records and shook their heads. We would have loved to see this patient 20 years earlier. But they still came up with a plan. Medication, monitoring, maybe surgery to make life easier. Andrew paid for everything without question, gave him a job at his office doing paperwork. Kate and Aaron were stunned at first. "Mom, we have a half-brother?" Kate checked. "And Dad just remembered that now?" "Dad decided to act like a human being now," I said. Sarcasm is how I keep from crying in front of my kids. But Ryan turned out to be one of those people it's impossible not to love. He cracked jokes when he felt awful, never complained about his heart, even though his face said every flight of stairs cost him.
He brought Erin coffee when she worked late. He explained computer stuff to Kate that she hated dealing with. And every night I looked at him and thought, this is what my son would have looked like if we hadn't ignored him until he was almost dead. Then there was Mary, Andrew's sister. We hadn't spoken in 10 years. Officially, we just didn't get along. In reality, she'd tried to warn me once, years ago, and I didn't understand until now. We met at a cafe. She showed up without makeup and an old hoodie, looking like someone who figured out a long time ago that the world isn't fair. Well, she said, finally clicked? It did, I answered. You knew? She let out a dry laugh. I found out when Rachel was still pregnant, tried to make him go see her, help. He said it wasn't his problem. I told him if he didn't help that child, I'd never spend another Christmas at the same table with him. And I didn't. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because I knew how much you loved him, and I didn't want to be the person who blew up your marriage. I hoped someday he'd man up. She paused. Spoiler, he didn't. Not until life slammed him into a wall. We sat in that cafe for 2 hours and cried. Then I said, he's trying to fix things now. If you want to see it, come to our anniversary party. She sighed. You sure you can handle all of us in one restaurant? Nope, I said, but I really want to see what happens. So for our 30th anniversary, we rented that nice restaurant downtown. White tablecloths, jazz band, a cheerful host who had no idea what show he'd just booked. At the table, we had us, our 2 daughters and their husbands, Ryan, Rachel, Mary, a few close friends, and some business partners Andrew had promised something special. They got something special, all right. After the first round of drinks, the host suggested Andrew and I say a few words. Andrew stood up with his glass and said, 30 years ago, I married a woman who was better at me than everything. I thought over time we'd grow more alike. Turns out I'm the one trying to catch up. He looked at me. Irene, you gave me 2 amazing daughters and one more child I wouldn't let myself see, but you still brought him into our family. He turned to Ryan. Ryan, I have no right to ask you to call me Dad, but I want you to know, as of today, you're my son, not just on paper. Ryan nodded. His mouth trembled, but he stayed quiet. Then Andrew said, at this table, there are 3 people I failed badly. Rachel, Mary, and honestly, you, Irene. If there's a villain in this story, it's me. And if any light came into it, it's because these women turned out kinder than I deserved. People clapped. Some cried. I thought that was the end of the emotional roller coaster. It wasn't. Rachel stood up with her glass. I saw Andrew's shoulders tense. Mine too. I'm not big on speeches, she said. I drove here planning to stay quiet. She looked straight at me. Irene, for a long time, I thought you were part of the problem. You were a symbol that he got to have a nice life while we didn't. But now I see you're the one who decided to fix this. Then she turned to Andrew. Years ago, I wrote your mom a letter, the last one. I was furious. I wrote that you'd never know the joy of a son and that your daughters would never be mothers. I was so angry. I wanted God to hear me. The whole table went dead silent. I don't know if he heard me back then, she went on, but tonight I want him to hear me now. I take those words back, all of them. She lifted her glass. Andrew, I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I'm tired of carrying this stone. And Irene, I wish your girls as many healthy babies as they want. May their home be full of noise. She downed her drink in one gulp. If you've ever tried not to ugly cry in a fancy restaurant with witnesses, you know exactly how that felt. Look, I know this sounds like the end of a movie, but real life keeps going after the credits roll. And if this story touched something in you, please like this video and subscribe to Anonymous Confessions, and leave a comment. I read them all, because your story matters too. A couple months after that party, my phone rang, Kate's name on the screen. Mom, she said, and I could hear she'd either been crying or was about to. I'm at the doctor. My stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "Nothing bad," she sniffled. "The doctor is pointing at the screen and saying, 'Hear that?' And I couldn't figure out what that noise was. And he says, 'That's a heart. Yours. Mom, do you get it?'" I got it so much that I had to sit down on the floor because my legs stopped working. Erin started a different treatment plan too. It was slower for her, but she finally found doctors who saw her as a person who desperately wanted a child, not a woman over 40 who should give up. I'm not going to pretend everything turned perfect. Ryan still has limitations. His heart reminds him every day that it's fragile. Andrew will never erase what he did at 20. But our house got lighter. That picture in the guest room stopped freaking me out. Ryan jokes that it protects his sleep. Sometimes I think about that day in the attic, the box of letters, the empty chair in the kitchen. Maybe it was just sunlight, or maybe it was the conscience of a man who spent 30 years pretending he didn't have a son. I don't know if it was the prayer in front of that picture, or Rachel's toast, or just medicine and luck. Honestly, I don't care. Here's what matters. If you've got some unresolved story in your past, especially one that involves kids, don't wait 30 years for someone to find a box of old mail, because by then, fixing it won't just hurt, it'll cost everything. And if you ever catch yourself whispering curses into your pillow, please remember Rachel driving halfway across the country to stand in a fancy restaurant and say, "I take my words back." Sometimes that's the only way to finally hear, "Mom, there's this weird noise. The doctor says it's a heart."